decade, we have continued to. But between the talks and the action, there's still a huge amount of gap that needs to be filled. And the exigencies stare us on the face. The reality is that with almost 190 million people in our population dynamics, we still are unable to provide power for most of our populace. And nothing can supply that largely other than gas. We look at the attraction of gas investment funds after the last LNG investment in Train 6. We really have not had a really dramatic investment in this sector. And so I'm very pleased that at least Nigeria LNG, through a lot of urgent work, is now almost at the threshold of doing their FID on Train 7, which will probably, hopefully, bring in investment funds in a manner between 7 billion and 10 billion. So that's very good. We look at LPG. Even our basic homes are still not supplied with LPG. And so we continue to burn firewood. We continue to use, to a very large extent, very mundane manners of trying to burn our kitchen utensils. Our cars are largely supplied by processed fuel. And in an era where we continue to struggle with the refineries, the fact that we haven't been able to convert even to gas when other countries are beginning to move to electricity means that we're basically 2 steps behind the goalpost. Pricing of gas has continued to be a major challenge, and that's been one of the critical issues. How do you price gas in such a way that there's enough incentive for those who produce gas to receive adequate rewards, and at the same time don't charge a cost that, quite frankly, just wears out the entire population in terms of what our economic strengths are. But we're working on those. We're spending a lot of time trying to find a middle ground and long-term dynamics on pricing that will help. We're beginning to look at how to put national resources and guarantees behind some of these investments to see how that can quicken the process. I look at some of the numbers that I see all over the world. I look at Mozambique, 7.7 billion investment in an LNG plant today. I look at Kenya, 2 billion. I look at Angola, 10 billion. And I look at the floating facility in Cameroon, which is roughly about 300 million. And there is still a lot of money out there which Nigeria should very easily attract. And I like the language used by whoever said it, that is not having the resource that is the issue, is what you do with the resource. I think if there's anything we must take away from this conference is that both for the investors and for the government, I keep saying and I keep repeating it, that we have an urgency of yesterday. If we do not take steps to attract the very limited capital that is out there in the diaspora for investment in gas plants and gas investments, and they all fizzle out into new emerging economies in Africa who are beginning to find gas almost by the day, we'll go to a point where we basically will be stuck with having to invest our own personal money, which we don't have, to be able to move gas forward. So there is a huge amount of urgency to look at policy again and not get stuck with policy directions that just do not move gas forward. And that's part of the challenge, and hopefully that's part of the advantages that bring from a private sector angle into government. So I think as we go forward, and I could say go on and on and on, but I'm sure not having been here for 2 days, most of the points I'm making have been made. I think the key elements are, first, we need to look at policy. We've worked very hard on policy. We've dealt with the Nigerian gas policy. We've inherited the previous policies that were there, rehashed them to get them better focused and from a business basis. We've done a lot of work in terms of the gas flare, beginning to open up our field so we can deal with the gas flare issues. We're looking at an LPG deployment systems around the whole country. So a lot of policy push has happened. The key element that has kept us behind is funding some of these policies. Most times we do not have the funds to push them forward. And the private sector has not quite bought into the fact that going forward, gas has got to be really the beautiful bride in the room. A lot of producers are still very focused on oil, putting less attention on what they need to do to gas. And we need to find a way of decoupling gas from oil in such a way that gas on its own can stand as a profitable investment without being basically a hybrid from oil. Infrastructure is key. Our infrastructure, with every decent word, simply stinks. We're just not investing enough in infrastructure. And that is really where the money needs to be put. Early in my position as both GMD of NNPC then and minister, we did a tour to China. It took about a week and got investment commitments of close to over 70 billion. And a lot of them was going to go into gas and oil infrastructure. We haven't quite followed as much as we should, and we need to. The money to develop infrastructure in this field is not going to come from government. It's going to come from the private sector. Private sector will not invest unless they can see adequate rewards at the end of the road, which means that whatever policies we put in place must be such that we can free out government from the monopoly of owning all these assets and let the private sector take hold of them. We're beginning to see that happen in some of the oil environment, where we're asking them to go in and build pipeline. Later this year, we're getting the president to launch what we call an infrastructural rebate of the country, which will look at largely the oil sector, because every infrastructure we bother to put in this country has been in other sectors, the social sectors. But the key sector that provides the bread and butter lacks infrastructure, and we need to begin to focus on that. Funding structures are key. How do we sit down and put together a funding structure that makes it exciting for people to invest, both in the infrastructure, both in the exploration of the resource, and also in the marketing of the resource? We need to begin to put those funding structures together. One thing Nigerians have proven over time, in every sector, oil not exclusive, is the fact that if the structures are right and the rewards are good, Nigerians are very bullish. We have huge entrepreneurial skills, huge entrepreneurial drives, and so we need to begin to push on those buttons and find out what it takes for them to build 1 kilometer of pipeline and feel that they're going to get a reward for those. Once we determine that and find that out, I think we're ready to go, and I think we're almost at the tail end of doing that. Gas flare, environmental issues continue to be issues. It's no longer an issue of convenience, it's an issue of survival. Communities are no longer tolerant of these flares. And so the work that WITA and his people are doing in terms of trying to exit gas flare by 2020, which is a very, very aggressive push, is key. That process is going to start sometime this month, hopefully, or next month, with the first adverts coming out in terms of the flare opportunities. I urge all of you to look into those possibilities. What we've tried to do here is not to really force the oil companies out of taking the benefits of the flare capture. It is to give you first an opportunity to do it, and if you can, then bring in investors who have been able to convince us that they can bring in the resource and whatever it takes to be able to get this delivered. So it's a project that we're watching very closely. We're very keenly involved in that and very excited about that. The PSC negotiations in terms of gas are key. We need to complete that so that it's clear to everybody what needs to be done. That process is also ongoing. So I look at all this and I say to myself, what is the future in this? Future is bright. Future is certainly adequately resourced, both in terms of the fiscal resource and in terms of the manpower resource. What we lack is also the financial resource. We need to work on that. But everything is possible. And so if there's anything you remember of me attending today, remember just 3 words. Those 3 words are, it is possible. It's absolutely possible. It is possible for us to give power to our people and provide a community that is not festered by darkness all around. It is possible to reposition gas policies in such a way that they provide an incentive and a boost to those who are investing and not a handicap or a stopping edge for those who want to be playing in the sector. It is possible to attract the very best resources all over the world into Nigeria because we are resource-based. We have proven success in the oil sector. There's absolutely no reason why we can't do it in the gas sector. It is possible to see Nigeria as a gas hub, not just for Nigeria, but for the whole of Africa. So that in many years, 20, 25, 30 years, no matter what projections you use from now when it is all done for oil, gas will continue to survive for another 50, 60 years thereafter and provide a resource that is essential for us to survive as a country. Thank you very much.